They heard the drums before they saw him. Deep, thunderous, unbroken, like the heartbeat of the land itself. British soldiers would later swear that the sound wasn't just noise, it was a warning. Because every time those drums echoed across the valleys of West Africa, one truth became clear. Samori Toure was coming. And the British Empire was not ready. His name would haunt colonial officers for decades. Not because he outnumbered them, he never did. Not because he had better weapons, he rarely did. But because Samori Toure fought with something the British could never fully understand. An unbreakable conviction that Africa was not theirs to take. Samori Toure didn't begin life as a legend. He began as a boy who watched everything he loved nearly destroyed. He was born around 1830 in the region that is now Guinea. His people, the Mandinka, were traders, farmers, and warriors, proud, disciplined, fiercely independent. But when Samori was still young, a rival raiding force attacked his village. His mother was captured. His father fought until he fell bleeding into the dirt. Most boys would have collapsed in grief. Samori didn't. He picked up his father's sword, a blade far too heavy for his small hands, and swore that no force on earth would ever take his family again. And so he became a soldier. Not because he wanted glory. Not because he wanted power. But because he understood one truth early in life. Freedom is never given. Freedom must be defended. By the time he was a grown man, Samori had built something the British never imagined they'd face. A modern African empire, organized, disciplined, and terrifyingly strategic. At its height, the Wassoulou Empire stretched across modern-day Guinea, Mali, Sierra Leone, and Ivory Coast. Not a chaotic group of tribes. Not a scattered resistance. A nation with a standing army of 30,000 fighters, a cavalry feared across West Africa, blacksmiths producing weapons day and night, a communication system so fast the British called it impossible, diplomats stationed across the region, and a ruler who planned battles like a mathematician solving equations. The French compared him to Napoleon. The British simply called him the most dangerous man in West Africa. But Samori Toure was no tyrant. He was a strategist, a negotiator, and, above all, a protector. Every village he freed, every alliance he signed, every soldier he trained had one purpose: to build a wall strong enough to stop Europe's hunger for African land. By the late 1800s, the British were expanding rapidly through West Africa. They crushed some kingdoms in months, others in weeks. But Samori's empire? That was different. When the British pushed south, Samori struck their supply lines. When they pushed east, he slipped west like smoke. When they tried to negotiate with him, he smiled politely, and used the time to fortify his bases. He didn't meet the British head-on. He didn't give them the big, dramatic battle they wanted. He bled them slowly, one ambush, one sabotage, one broken convoy at a time. And because he never stopped moving, never stopped reorganizing, never stopped thinking, the British realized something terrifying. Samori Toure wasn't just fighting them. He was outsmarting them. That's when they changed their strategy. If they couldn't crush him through war, they would crush him through patience. The next decade became one long chess match. The British moved in squares. Samori moved in circles. He trained new fighters as fast as the British could kill them. He forged alliances with chiefs the British thought were already conquered. He rebuilt burned cities in months. He shifted his capital to stay unpredictable. And he modernized his army. Samori sent envoys across the Sahara to secure new weapons. He studied British rifles and taught his smiths how to replicate the parts. He created specialized units trained to fight in forests, mountains, and open plains. The British started losing men. Then they started losing morale. Then they started losing confidence. They wrote letters back to London saying, "This man will not stop. He cannot be cornered. He cannot be reasoned with. He fights like he is fighting for his soul. And he was. In 1891, the British believed they finally had Samori trapped. They had pushed deep into his territory, occupied key towns, and cut off several supply routes. But Samori made a move none of them expected. Instead of surrendering, instead of retreating, he ordered the evacuation of his entire capital. Tens of thousands of people, farms, workshops, armories, all moved in a single night. And when the British arrived the next morning, the capital was burning. Samori had set fire to his own city, not out of despair, not out of defeat, but because he knew this. If he could not stop the British from advancing, he could at least stop them from using anything he built. A British officer wrote, "We have never fought an enemy like this. He destroys his own kingdom just to deny us the satisfaction of taking it." To the British Empire, this was madness. To Samori, it was a strategy. In the final years of his war, Samori vanished into the dense, dark forests of the Ivory Coast, terrain the British hated and feared. Malaria ruled those forests. Thick vines swallowed horses whole. Every tree could hide an archer. Every turn could end in an ambush. Yet Samori moved through it like a shadow. He built new bases deep inside the jungle. He trained new fighters. He armed villages. He kept the resistance alive. And as British troops marched deeper into the forest, one whisper followed them. "He is watching you." By 1898, after more than 17 years of non-stop war, the British were exhausted, embarrassed, and desperate. They unleashed their final tactic, something they had used across Africa: starvation and isolation. They cut off every road, every river, every supply chain, every route Samori could use to escape. His fighters grew thin. Weapons grew scarce. Villages suffered. And still, Samori refused to surrender. But even legends have limits. On September 29, 1898, after fighting 3 empires, the British, the French, and African rivals funded by Europe, Samori Toure was finally surrounded. Not defeated. Surrounded. He looked at his remaining fighters, men who had followed him through deserts, rivers, and forests. Men who would have died for him without question. He told them, "A leader does not sacrifice his people for pride. Live to protect this land. Live to remember who we are." He surrendered himself. The British expected a broken old man. Instead, they found a proud ruler who stood tall even as they chained him. He was exiled far away, to Gabon. There, he lived quietly. But quietly does not mean forgotten. Villagers came from miles away just to hear his stories. Young fighters memorized his strategies. Elders repeated his wisdom to new generations. And the British discovered something they never expected. You can capture a warrior. You can exile a king. But you cannot imprison an idea. Samori Toure's idea was simple. Africa belongs to Africans. And no empire, no matter how powerful, can erase a people who refuse to bow. Samori Toure died in exile in 1900. But his story didn't end there. His grandson would one day lead a nation. Not with swords. Not with armies. But with the same unbreakable belief in African freedom. That grandson was Sékou Touré, the first president of Guinea, the man who stood up to France and declared, "We prefer poverty in freedom than riches in slavery." The spirit of resistance ran in their blood. Today, historians call Samori Touré a military genius. A strategist ahead of his time. A symbol of African resistance. But to the people who still whisper his name in West Africa, he is something far greater. The warrior who stood against the British Empire and made them tremble. They proved black excellence isn't new, it's been here all along. The receipts existed. The system just burned them. Now you know. And knowing changes everything. Like, comment, and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more untold Black history stories. And tell me in the comments, what did you learn from this video? Because remembering is resistance. And resistance is how history finally changes.